teams. Here we go. Getting set up on the stage, getting prepared for the match ahead of them as they take a look at their team sheets, getting into the game. I believe Davide, back at the Utrecht special event, he was running a Dondozo Tatsugiri team. Will he be doing the same here? Might he have changed little things on his team? And that's another fantastic thing that this game allows. You can run essentially the same team, but with very slight changes to the techniques, the items, abilities, and so on, and catch your opponent off guard.
Exactly, but in this open team sheet format though, it is quite hard to catch people like off guard, but in terms of how you've been team building though, you may have team built your team in a way that is countering what you think is going to be common, what you might see, but if your opponent brings something you weren't expecting, yes, you could see it on the team sheet, but in terms of how your team will actually play against it, you may not have a plan as to what to lead or what to bring, what moves to use, or how your opponent's going to play it. So there's still definitely a surprise factor when it comes to open team sheets.
Yeah, very much so. It's, you don't know what your opponent is going to be thinking. And yes, there are certain archetypes that you can practice against, but, you know, if it's not running a Fluttermane, Amoonguss, Palafin, Arcanine core, then, you know, it might not be a core that we've seen so far. It might be something completely new, and it's hard to prepare for everything, but that's why practice is so important for an event like this.
So we are shortly going to be getting up the teams of both of these players, but first of all, let's have a look at the accolades of both of these players here. Taran, there he is, Perth Regional Champion, and he knows it. There he is, that smile. NIIC top 8, EUIC top 16, Liverpool Regionals top 8, and of course 5-0 today.
Sheesh, that's a lot of accomplishments there for Taran. And Davide on the other side, world top 8 last year, 2020 Players Cup 2 finalist, of course, in that online era of Pokemon, as we were talking about, as well as a UIC finalist in 2019. I mean, both of these players have such recent achievements and such fantastic achievements.
Bruh, those are like amazing, aren't they? To be like in those, like, in these seats, being 5-0 in the Malmö Regional Championships, and how we're having so many points under your belt too, is really something. So I'm sure 2023 is going to be quite the year for both of these trainers here, coming off all of these matches over the years too. So we'll be shortly getting into the teams though, and we've already had like a little sneak peek actually, and as we can see here, Taran is running like a fairly standard team that we've seen in a lot of other rounds here, and we will shortly be going into it. It's kind of Murkrow, Great Tusk, Chi-Yu, Fluttermane, Amoonguss, and the Gyarados. But on the face of it, it looks kind of standard at the moment from what we've seen, but the Gyarados is a Life Orb set with a Terra Flying option, the Terra Blast option. So it's got a little bit more offense and packs a little bit more of a punch, definitely, than most of the other Gyarados that we've been seeing.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to see, and it's a prime example of what we were talking about before, of how you can run a Pokemon that's fairly common at the moment, like Gyarados, but change certain things that your opponent might not be expecting. And Terra Blast, Terra Flying, I mean, as it was in Regulation B back when we were doing Utrecht, there aren't that many Pokemon that resist the Flying type in the format right now. Looking over to David, oh, here we go, here's Taran's team on screen, so you can put into practice what we've been talking about. There's that Gyarados there, as well as Chi-Yu being the Treasure of Ruin of choice. Murkrow, really interesting to see there as well with Sunny Day, so we might be able to activate the photosynthesis on the Fluttermane and the Great Tusk. A Pokemon who we saw more of in Regulation A, for example, but we've seen a couple of them so far on stream today.
I know I keep going back to this Gyarados, but the Helping Hand as well. I didn't know Gyarados got a Helping Hand. It doesn't have hands. Even more of an impressive Pokemon, to be honest. Maybe it's the whiskers. I don't know. Maybe it does something with that.
Those whiskers.
But either way, this is a very offensive team, so I expect a lot from Taran here to be able to, and dishing out a lot of damage from all of these Pokemon.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of choice items on his team as well, with the Specs on Fluttermane and a Scarf on the Great Tusk. So, you know, those Pokemon won't be able to protect, and they'll be locked into whatever move they immediately choose on going onto the field. But looking across to Davide's team now, it's Fluttermane, King Gambit, Chien-Pao, Gyarados, Great Tusk, and Dragonite. And that Gyarados for Davide is slightly more what we've come to expect from this event so far.
Yeah, with the Terra Poison and the Citrus Berry, that's kind of more what we see. Icy Wind is an interesting choice and a good one too. Speed control can never be understated in the game of VGC. But yeah, we've got the Fluttermane and Great Tusk and the Gyarados in common in both of these teams. But what we do find interesting here is the Dragonite with the multi-scale and that choice band. And Dragonite often really does not want to take like a Will-O-Wisp or anything from like an Arcanine, for instance, but now it's got the Facade as an option is really cool if it can go for that.
Yeah, it really is. It's a Pokemon that, you know, normally you do not want your Pokemon to be taking status conditions, but with a move like Facade, you actively do want that. The damage that it can be dealing, and especially with a Terra Normal, as we saw on Davide's team there, it's absolutely not something to be ignored. And both of these trainers are rocking a Choice Scarf on their Great Tusk, but it's time for you to let us know who you think might win, and this looks like a very even one, David.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, Taran's from the UK, I don't know. Davide kind of shares my name. Like, it's really hard to kind of pick who I kind of want to win here. But as to think who is going to win, it's also hard to pick because both of these players have got so much experience from over the years and from their previous tournaments. So it is a hard one here. I'm going to give you that. So well done if you do eventually get it right.
I don't know if you noticed there, David, but as soon as you said that Davide shares your name, there was a big old swing in favour of Davide there. So clearly the Twitch chat loves the fact that he's rocking the same name as you, but it's starting to balance out again. This really is 50-50. It'll be fascinating to see which of these trainers comes out on top, because according to Twitch, they are very evenly matched.
We'll see if next round Charlie comes on or something. Yeah, like, we'll have a look, see who's doing well. So, anyway, looking at these teams in terms of how they're going to match up against each other, we've got a lot of things in common. As you said, we've got the Choice Scarf Great Tusk and the Choice Specs Fluttermane both in common. But that's going to be really important in terms of how they interact with each other in terms of their speed. Because if one hitting the other can still do a significant chunk. Like, but neither wants to take a headlong rush if you're a Great Tusk. Neither wants to take a Shadow Ball if you're a Fluttermane. So, and that's something you don't know about open team sheets, right? Is how fast or how trained the Pokemon of your opponent are.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the few things you don't know, and it can make all the difference. And another example of going into a match thinking, oh, okay, well, there's a Fluttermane, it's going to be fast, but then you're taken off guard by the fact that, of course, it could be rocking something like a substitute, as we've been seeing more commonly at, for example, EUIC, and something that's been picking up really quite a lot in recent weeks. And both of these trainers are, of course, running that Fluttermane, which is just ubiquitous at the moment.
Exactly, and so we may see it here today, and yes, once again, Fluttermane and Amoonguss, and also very common lead we've seen today as well in those two. But it's faced into the Gyarados and the King Gambit on Davide's end. Let's see how much damage comes out of this turn.
Yeah, and we saw the reveal of a electric-type move on Taran's Fluttermane there, which will really threaten down Davide's Gyarados. Really exciting to see if he can pick a big knockout potentially on turn one. So Davide's Gyarados may well be wanting to keep itself safer in this particular instance. But yeah, the Fluttermane and Amoonguss lead, maybe that's something for us all to try at home. Take a leaf out of these top trainers' books and try playing with that. As we see an immediate Terra, David.
Here is the Terra straight away. Game one of this round 6 of the Malmö Regional Championships, and it is the Terra Poison Gyarados. A great option, especially as there is not too much for Taran to be able to hit this poison type. Anyway, it's Amoonguss going for Rage Powder first, redirecting anything away to help this Fluttermane out. And it is that Thunderbolt you mentioned, Charlie, but a great call from Davide to really keep it safe, as the Taunt now comes out into the Amoonguss, so it's not going to be able to do that any of more of those supporting shenanigans that it had done before. But first, it's taking an Iron Head, and it's doing about a third of its health.
Yeah, a third to half of its health there. Of course, the one move that could still, Amoonguss could still go for is a Pollen Puff, because even though it can heal up your teammate, it does still deal damage to the opponent as well if you choose it to do that. So it doesn't quite count as a status move. So an immediate Terra from Davide on this turn one. Taran is playing it safer, keeping his Terra ready in the back. Fluttermane decides to withdraw for Taran in favour of that Great Tusk. So it's going to be Choice Scarf, Great Tusk, very fast moves coming out from it. Icy Wind dodged by Amoonguss, but it goes into the Great Tusk, which is probably, out of the two options, the Pokemon that Davide is more pleased about hitting, as Assurance doubles up into the Amoonguss, a move that doubles in power if the Pokemon has already taken damage, which Amoonguss didn't on this turn, given it dodged the Icy Wind. So that was very fortunate for the Amoonguss there.
and a Great Tusk is exactly what he'd be bringing in here, especially as Davide has already committed his Terror. So there's 2 Pokemon that are weak to ground, and nothing can Terror out of that weakness right now. However, the Icy Wind has really hit the correct target that Davide really wants to hit, and depending on the training of some of these Pokemon, there might be a chance for something in the back to outspeed this Great Tusk. But at the moment, with that Choice Scarf, this Great Tusk is definitely going to be faster at the moment.
Yeah, what's useful for Taran in this position is because the Gyarados has already used its Terror, he doesn't have to play any mind games of, oh, will it Terror this turn, will it not? Because a ground-type move is super effective now into that Gyarados, whereas before it wouldn't have done anything, given that Gyarados is natively a flying type. So that's quite a relief for Taran, I'm sure, as Davide withdraws his Gyarados.
The Gyarados is going out this time, saving the Intimidate for later. As Dragonite comes in, yes, that is going to take a ground move a lot better. So a great switch by Davide, assuming Taran's gone for some sort of ground move. But first, Flutter Mane is coming in here. And again, really nicely catching kind of the Dragonite switching in here to kind of pressure it into the next turn. And yes, it is the headlock long rush into that turn. As the Iron Head goes into the switching in Flutter Mane away from that Amoonguss with a critical hit too. Not sure if that mattered. But that is a massive KO and a huge play from Davide.
Yeah, what a call from Davide there, catching the Flutter Mane on the switch in, and it's down and out before it could really provide much in this game. Wow, it just goes to show how important predictions are in VGC as Gyarados joins the field for Taran, and it's going to drop the attack of Dragonite and King Gambit. But of course, King Gambit with that Define ability is now going to boost its special attack by boost its physical attack by 2 stages, so it's at +1 in its attack stat now. Oh my goodness, the King Gambit is beginning to look quite threatening.
Yeah, it is. It's probably the slowest thing on the field, though, at the moment. So it's not too threatening, but this King Gambit does have Sucker Punch, as many of them do. So it can definitely get away with an attack before it goes down if it starts to get into the low health zone. So it's up to this Great Tusk as to whether it's going to throw out a ground move at some point. And yeah, with an Intimidate, this King Gambit may just live.
Yeah, it may well do, but Gyarados is going for the helping hand, so whatever it's throwing out, will it be able to pick up some kind of knockout? It's Headlong Rush into the King Gambit, and it is!
Oh!
It is enough. That helping hand was crucial there, I imagine, on the Great Tusk, because with that drop to its attack stat, it would not have been able to pick up that knockout otherwise. So a really nice tech to have helping hand on the Gyarados, proving it, David. There you go. It doesn't have hands, but it can still provide ample support.
Yeah, I'll give it to Gyarados. I'll hand it to him, in fact. He's done very well. Now, Dragonite does come in, so it's still a safe slot, though, for Taran to kind of go for the ground move into the Gyarados slot, because the Gyarados on this one does not have Protect, and the Dragonite, the flying type, is already out in the field. And in terms of what could be in the back, nothing is going to be able to take a ground move. So Davide is still in a kind of a tricky position as to how much it wants to take from this Headlong Rush. And it's going to be down to the Dragonite as to whether it's going to be able to deal enough damage to be able to KO this bulky Great Tusk. But I don't know if it's got it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's got it as well. Of course, Great Tusk has eaten up a defense drop, having used Headlong Rush, so there is that to take into consideration when we come to our damage calculations. But it's Taran going for the Terror into the Steel type on that Great Tusk. Another Headlong Rush into Gyarados. It's enough for the knockout, of course, being super effective, given Gyarados has Terrastalized into the Poison type. But it does eat up another defensive drop, so that Great Tusk might not be around for that much longer, even though it's just used its Terror option. So it's knockouts left, right, and center as a Waterfall coming out from Gyarados into Dragonite. A little bit of chip damage, but crucially breaking that multi-scale ability onto Davide's Dragonite. So subsequent attacks will be doing far more to this Dragonite now.
Yeah, and there's the Aerial Ace, so a really great Terror there for Taran, and a really not very common one either, being the Steel type. A lot of trainers going for that ground Terror on Great Tusk to really make the most of its kind of ground type offense, which is such a great type to have offensively, and kind of get rid of the fighting type weaknesses. But going for the Steel, especially versus a Dragonite that loves to use those normal moves, or its flying moves, is an excellent option, and you can see it really paying off here.
Yeah, for sure. Taran's Great Tusk is, it's had a couple of defense drops, but against the Dragonite, there's not a great deal it can do. And if Davide's Chim Power is running something like a Sacred Sword, then of course that might spell not good news for Taran's Great Tusk. But these trainers are now really considering their game state here as Great Tusk switches out. In fact, for Taran, so it will reset those defense drops. I really like that play. As Amoonguss joins the field instead, able to provide ample support.
As the Chien-Pao goes for Protect, to kind of keep itself a little bit safe, obviously, to maybe preserve its sash, which it now does. So a good call from Davide, but has he made the most of it with this aerial ace targeting on the Dragonite? Yes, he has. He calls the switch, I think, from this great task into what was the Amoonguss. So 2 catches for Davide in this game from so a really well played thoughts going behind there.
So impressive, as it's 2 Pokemon apiece now for these trainers, and I've got to say they're relatively evenly matched. I feel like Twitch chat was on the money here, as going into this end game is quite difficult to call because, of course, Taran's Great Tusk has reset its defensive drops, and it's got a Choice Scarf. It has a Rock-type move. That is spread damage. Will it be able to pick up anything here? Oh, very low health on both Pokemon.
Flinch on the Chien-Pao.
And a flinch on Chien-Pao. Oh, wow. Taran has really turned this end game into a dream for him. What a fantastic decision to preserve that Great Tusk. Yes, Amoonguss went down, but in the end, it's the Great Tusk that's putting in the work here.
That's, yeah, absolutely huge rock slide hit, flinch onto the Chien-Pao, because that Chien-Pao does have Sacred Sword, so could have responded with that and probably KO'd this Great Tusk. So, an absolute massive one, but if you were rock sliding and you were hitting, your chance of getting a flinch are pretty good.
Yeah, and we've got to bear in mind as well, Chien-Pao's lowering the defense of everything on the field, so Dragonite took that rock slide worse than it might have been able to otherwise as a result of that, but it was able to just hang on. Both these Pokemon on very low health. Of course, Dragonite could go for an extreme speed Sucker Punch coming out from Chien-Pao. Another priority move. It's another rock slide. It's a double connect. And Taran Birdee takes this first game of Swiss round 6 here in Malmö. Oh, that was intense.
That was intense. And as soon as he switched in the Flutter Mane earlier there, and it just completely went down, I thought, oh no, Taran's on the back foot now. Yeah. He's going to have to be thinking about game 2 maybe. But no, he absolutely turns it around. Really thanks to that Great Tusk putting in so much work.
Yeah, so much work. Rock Slide is such a nice move on that Great Tusk because it covers for some of its weaknesses there, especially when it's Terra Steel, which would also be weak to the Fire type. But absolutely, David, for, quite early on in that game, I thought Davide had the upper hand, but just goes to show you play to your outs. You keep going until it's over, and it absolutely worked out in Taran's favor. I'd have loved to have seen if the Chien-Pao for Davide would have been able to pick up the knockout on Great Tusk with that Sacred Sword, but maybe we'll be able to see it in game 2.
I think based on that Sucker Punch damage, I would say Sacred Sword does, because it had already taken a little bit of chip damage as well. So, but yeah, we're yet to see. So, but going into game 2 though now, Charlie. So, Taran obviously pulled it out the bag there thanks to his Great Tusk, but it is Choice Scarf, so it doesn't offer you a lot of flexibility. Luckily, he was able to switch it out and then switch back to that Rock Slide. And Davide was caught also with his Choice Aerial Ace, which he doesn't like too. But suddenly, if you switch up those options, then it can be a very different game.
Yeah, and it was really interesting how the Aerial Ace from Dragonite, which isn't the most powerful move, was able to pick up that one-hit knockout on Taran's Amoonguss. Of course, it is carrying that Choice Band, and I imagine that Davide has done his damage calculations and worked out just how many attack effort values he needs on his Dragonite, with Aerial Ace being Choice banded to pick up the knockout on the Amoonguss. So really interesting tech to bear in mind. And yes, going into game 2, I mean, it was somewhat fortunate that Taran got that flinch onto the Chien-Pao. So he's going to want to be going for a more reliable win condition, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And something Taran does have, though, that Davide doesn't have really, is the Murkrow. So that offers a very reliable option for speed control that Davide does not have. And if he can use it to set up the Sun as well, he can boost the power of his Great Tusk even further. So obviously we saw the Rock Slide not quite get the KO on both of those Pokemon. Imagine if the Sun was up. Suddenly Dragonite goes down and you've knocked down the Sash for the Chien-Pao as well. So that could be a nice option to bring into this game.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see. Davide's main form of speed control on his team, it looks like, is Icy Wind on his Gyarados, which is a really useful move, but it's not quite as immediately effective as something like a Tailwind from Murkrow. Of course, the trade-off there is that Murkrow is not the most powerful Pokemon. It's not a fully evolved Pokemon, so Murkrow frailer, but able to have more of an immediate impact on the game than Icy Wind coming out from Davide's Gyarados. But it's really cool to see Icy Wind there on that Gyarados.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm happy with the slam slander of Murkrow there, Charlie. Like, he's right on our desk here, and like Murkrow is great. All right, and I like the way Taran's playing it too, because he's got the Brave Bird on there too, where a lot of players might go for a dark move potentially, but the Brave Bird is really cool because it is a flying offensive move, which, as you said earlier, Charlie, there aren't a lot of players or a lot of Pokemon that can really have that as a really nice option, and not a lot of Pokemon resist it.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the damage output from a Murkrow, just to cover for myself there, David, I apologize I offended you about Murkrow, but the damage output from a Murkrow with Brave Bird isn't something to be ignored when it carries that Eviolite item as well, which only works for a Pokemon that's yet to evolve. It does get a boost to its defenses, so it can stick around for longer as well.
Okay, we're getting into this game 2. Davide Carrera versus Taran Birdee in the round 6 of the Malmö Regional Championships. And it's Fluttermane and Great Tusk versus Chien-Pao and King Gambit.
Yeah, it's a really interesting switch up here from Taran with that Fluttermane and Great Tusk being led immediately. Really nice, fast offense there on the field. King Gambit not so fast, but it would be able to threaten with something like a Sucker Punch, as could Chien-Pao. And that Chien-Pao is, of course, much faster. It's a bit of a glass cannon. It could be taken down to its focus sash, but this is already a really fast-paced turn.
Yeah, and the Great Tusk kind of matchup into the King Gambit here is really interesting too, because there's a lot of mind games at play here. So on the surface, King Gambit is weak to fighting and ground. It can Terastallize to get rid of the fighting weakness into the fire type, but you're still weak to ground, and you're then suddenly weak to rock too. So King Gambit's in a really tricky spot here, and I don't know whether Davide is going to want to keep it in here, but it looks like he is.
Yeah, it does look like he is. No switches coming out, and it's the Terra coming out immediately for Taran onto his Great Tusk, something he saved for slightly later on in the game in that first match. But yes, into that Steel type. Really interesting choice there on his Great Tusk. Sucker Punch is indeed coming out from Chien-Pao. It's a lot of damage, not enough for the knockout, but
double
with
sucker.
a double from the King Gambit as well, and Taran is looking very frustrated there that his Fluttermane went immediately down. But there you go. That's what priority moves can do. Rock Slide is going to be doing very good damage onto the Chien-Pao, not so much the Steel type King Gambit, but wow, Fluttermane down on turn 1.
Yeah, a really great call from Davide there. I think maybe Taran was expecting Davide kind of to respect the Great Tusk from his King Gambit a little bit there, have something that switch out, and Taran knows that Fluttermane can survive kind of maybe one attack from Chien-Pao, but no, Davide kind of doubles up, right, if you're going to get my King Gambit, you can get it, but I'm going to get a Sucker Punch out first, and he absolutely gets a huge KO. Yeah,
absolutely massive KO. Fluttermane is something that can threaten a huge amount of damage wearing those choice specs, as we can see there. So Chien-Pao King Gambit really paying dividends for Davide as Taran decides to switch out his Great Tusk in favor of that Gyarados coming into it. Will be dropping the attack stat of Chien-Pao. Of course, it will also activate the Defiant on Davide's King Gambit, but my suspicion is that Taran will have budgeted for that going into this turn.
Yes, budgeting is a key skill in Pokemon, that's for sure. But as Chien-Pao now switches out to reset that Intimidate, Gyarados of Davide's own now comes in here to lower the attack stat of this more offensive Gyarados that Taran has here, and a good switch in too, especially if you want to kind of taunt the following turn. Amoonguss does take a good amount of damage there, but a Citrus Berry kind of puts it away safely from another attack. Yeah, absolutely. What's Amoonguss doing here? It's going to be putting that King Gambit to sleep, and that's exactly what we were talking about. Budgeting for the Defiant boost onto the King Gambit. Now it's not going to be moving for at least one turn, so this is Taran's opportunity to try and neutralize the threat of that King Gambit and maybe pivot around it, slow down the game pace, pick up some knockouts where he might be able to, having lost that Fluttermane. He's coming into this turn with a vengeance. And the keen eyes of you out there who may have seen Taran locking in his moves there, he's going for the taunt into Davide's Gyarados, probably to try and stop the taunting of the other Gyarados, to be able to stop the Amoonguss going for his own Spore. So I really like this play at the moment. There's not a lot Davide can do really to kind of do anything about it either, especially if this Gyarados outspeeds. Yeah, especially that. King Gambit is going to take a nap back in its Pokeball now, as Great Tusk is going to join the field for Davide. And yes, the only way to shut down a taunt is a taunt unless you're carrying a Mental Herb, which this Gyarados is not. So there we go, that interaction there. Gyarados can't taunt, having been taunted. Amoonguss is now very free to set things to sleep. So even though Taran lost his Fluttermane so early in the game, now Amoonguss is able to slow down the pace of this game, and Davide is not able to respond with that much offense at the moment. But Taran is going to want to be picking up some big damage while he can, while these Pokemon are sleeping. Absolutely. But Great Tusk now is in the field, and Amoonguss is a little bit low enough now on its health that it's probably in range of a headlong rush from Davide's Great Tusk. So Taran does have to now play a little bit more carefully now. But a switch from this Amoonguss, which it looks like he might be doing, would be able to heal it up with the Regenerator ability. And keeping Gyarados in offers a lot of water-type damage into the Great Tusk, which would deal a decent amount, probably not a KO, but would put it in range of being able to get KO'd maybe the following turn. But first, Davide switches out his own Gyarados.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to take a nap back in its Pokeball again as Chien-Pao rejoins the field. Will Amoonguss be going for another Spore and just continuing that cycling? We will have to see, as Taran also withdraws his Gyarados, so ready to provide another Intimidate, which it can do even if it's sleeping, which will be some comfort to Davide as Great Tusk rejoins the field, having already terrestrialized into the Steel type. Amoonguss won't be chucking out another Spore, just keeping itself safe this turn, which is a really good call because Headlong Rush was going into the Amoonguss slot.
Yeah, really good call from Taran, because now he definitely pressures with the offense that his own Great Tusk has. Now, I don't know if we've seen the speed interaction between the two Choice Scarf Great Tusks yet, as to whether who is faster or not. So obviously now Taran's Great Tusk is Steel type. It's definitely looking a little bit scary for him if he's the slower one, and Davide just targets a Headlong Rush straight into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or indeed a fighting type move. Steel does not appreciate either of those types, but Gyarados is able to rejoin the field and drop the attack stat of Chien-Pao and Great Tusk for Davide. A far more positional game, this one, as opposed to the first one. And Headlong Rush is enough to pick up the knockout with a critical hit to boot onto Taran's Great Tusk, and he is frustrated about that. We can see in his camera, Great Tusk does go down, so both of his Paradox Pokemon are down and out in the Fluttermane and the Great Tusk. That's really a shame for Taran.
Yeah, that's really super unfortunate, because I think there is a world where a lot of Great Tusks can survive 2 Headlong Rushes from opposing Great Tusks. So I feel like even he probably would have survived there. So, but it does obviously depend on the training of this Great Tusk on Davide's end. It might have been, say, the Adamant nature, which does increase the attack even further. So we're yet to know. But at the moment, Taran does forfeit the game. So we're going into a Game 3, Charlie.
We're going into a Game 3 between Taran Birdee of Great Britain and Davide Correa of Italy. And wow, so both of these trainers have quite a lot of information now as to how their opponent likes to play their team. And going into this next one, will we see that Murkrow finally coming out from Taran? We can hope so, but I gotta say, Taran did not have luck on his side in that battle.
Not this time, but he had it in the first game with the flinch, so you could say things have slightly evened out, maybe. But either way, like going into Game 3, both players kind of switched things up a little bit in terms of their leads. So they're obviously going in for something a little, trying to kind of switch things to make them more of a solid, kind of or more concrete game plan. And still kind of the random number generator kind of really kind of threw things into the mix at the moment in this game again. So something to eliminate that, though, especially now knowing Taran's Great Tusk is slower, is bringing Murkrow to get the Tailwind up.
Yeah, it really would be, and we haven't seen Chi-Yu as well coming out from Taran there, but of course that would be quite weak to Gyarados and Great Tusk from Davide. So, you know, it'll be really interesting going into Game 3 to see if these trainers will rely on the leads that worked for them in their respective winning games, or whether they're going to whip a new tactic out of the bag that we have not seen yet.
Yeah, and that certainly could be the case at the moment, because looking at Davide's team there, he really used the Kingambit to great effect, didn't he, in that game? And thanks to the Kingambit's bulk, we saw him really expertly position the Gyarados' Intimidate to really support it really well too. So that's something that seemed to really work for him in that Game 1. I think I'd like to see him use the Kingambit a little bit more this time to kind of pressure a lot of knockouts everywhere. Because looking at Taran's team, nothing wants to take like all the attacks that this Kingambit has. Yeah,
for sure. It was really interesting, though, to see he did utilize his Kingambit with that Sucker Punch in Game 2, and indeed the double Sucker Punch with Chien-Pao as well. It's a really nice tech to be able to put onto your Pokemon, because Kingambit threatens big Dark-type damage, and Chien-Pao is dropping the defense of all surrounding Pokemon. So, yeah, those priority moves, assuming that your opponent is going for an attacking move, really powerful.
Yeah, and it also, in both games, the Fluttermane went down, like, without doing anything. So poor Taran. But anyway, Fluttermane and Amoonguss, so going back to the Game 1 leads for Taran here. And on Davide's end, the Kingambit Gyarados, same as leads us to Game 2.
Yeah, absolutely. So there it is. That's exactly what was predicted. They're going with the leads that worked for them in their respective winning games. Now, hopefully, Taran will be able to get more out of his Flutter Mane in this game than he has in the previous two, and that's absolutely something he's going to be mindful of going into this turn one. Both these trainers, one game apiece. Whoever wins this next game will be winning Swiss round 6 and getting that coveted 6-0 record so far at Malmö. So as these trainers lock in their moves, and Davide taking a little bit of time to think, that makes sense. So much is on the line here as he locks in his moves.
Yep, there's a lot that can happen in this turn especially. It just really depends on what direction both of these players want to do. Because Gyarados, you may want to save your Intimidate for a little bit later. You might want to get it out right now, so when the Great Tusk comes in, you can switch it in a Ground Resist or something, or you can get Intimidate on it too. But no, Davide goes straight for the Poison Terror here. And I like this as well, because a lot of speed control options on this Gyarados.
Yeah, a lot of speed control options, what with Icy Wind, for example, but it's Rage Powder coming out from Taran's Amoonguss, so any non-spread move will be redirected into that. Dazzling Gleam doesn't do too much damage on either Pokemon thanks to the Terror. Amoonguss takes that Waterfall like a champion, of course, because it's a resisted hit. Iron Head brings it down to about half health, and that activates its Citrus Berry. So Amoonguss is keeping itself relatively healthy here, and it could, of course, withdraw at any point and get a Regenerator boost to its HP.
Now, a perfect turn for Taran there, actually, all things considered, really. He finally gets an attack off with the Flutter Mane, with that Dazzling Gleam. Not doing a whole lot of damage, though, because that Kingambit is just so bulky. The Terra Poison on the Gyarados makes things so bulky. And interestingly, no kind of taunt came out from Davide's Gyarados there either. So Amoonguss is still free to kind of do the same thing again and just chip things away a little bit more. And at that point, Great Tusk can come in at some point and just clean up.
Yeah, for sure, and that's absolutely what happened for Taran in Game 1. It is Flutter Mane withdrawing, so could it be Great Tusk coming in? It is indeed. Ooh. So in the following turn, it may well be able to provide some ample damage. Amoonguss is going to keep himself safe. Let's hope that this Great Tusk is able to get in safely, depending on what Davide has gone for. It is an Icy Wind, so that will be a super effective hit onto the Great Tusk, assuming it connects, which it does, and it will be lowering the speed, which, wearing the Choice Scarf, is not ideal. It's designed to be incredibly fast. Kingambit is trying to go for an Assurance to follow up onto that Amoonguss, but keeping itself safe. Would have been double damage, of course, because Amoonguss would have taken some prior damage from the Icy Wind.
A great play there, actually, by Taran once again, and a very similar one to what we saw in Game 1, where he got the Great Tusk in, it took the speed drop, but then he got it into a position where he was then threatening massive ground-type damage versus, again, both the Gyarados and the Kingambit, which had already committed the Terror. So Taran puts himself in a really good position now, but last time, Davide switched his Gyarados into the Dragonite and caught the Headlong Rush really well. Thing is, can he do that again? Does Taran expect him to do the same thing again? Does Taran switch it up? Does he go for an Earthquake instead? But no! Headlong Rush straight to the Gyarados. It is down!
Phew, that Gyarados has gone down. It was a super effective ground-type move into the Terra Poison, and it's down and out for the count. It's an early knockout here for Taran. He'll be feeling really good about that, given his own Flutter Mane went down so early in that game too. And Iron Head coming out, still not enough to pick up the knockout on that Amoonguss. And Amoonguss is able to put the Kingambit to sleep for its trouble. So there it is, being pesky on the field. Amoonguss is not an option that Davide has available to him.
Don't want to say there's there is really sometimes a perfect turn going out, and I think that was it for Taran in that game. No flinch from the Iron Head. He got the KO that he wanted, and now the Kingambit is stuck asleep, and it can't even wake up next turn. However, Davide's Great Tusk has now come in, and we know it is naturally faster than Taran's, even without the Icy Wind speed drop on it. So Taran might be keen to kind of maybe switch out, reset some defensive drops from the Headlong Rush, and yet seeing that Gyarados in the back, that's probably a really nice switch at the moment. And especially if you activate the Defiant on the Kingambit, you don't have to worry about it too much this turn because it's already going to have to be asleep for the next turn.
It is, but then when it wakes up, it may well be quite the threat. So something he wants to deal with sooner rather than later. But Amoonguss is going to withdraw, and it's going to heal a little bit of HP back thanks to its Regenerator ability. As Gyarados joins the field, it will be giving an attack boost to the Kingambit thanks to its Defiant. Great Tusk will be eating up an attack drop there, however. And this really is the battle of the Great Tusks, this particular matchup between Taran and Davide. It is a Rock Slide coming out from Davide. Maybe comeuppance for Taran, given what he was able to achieve with his Rock Slides in Game 1, but it's a flinch onto Taran's Great Tusk, so it's not going to be able to deal out any kind of damage this turn. A real shame, given that Kingambit might wake up on the following turn.
Exactly. It's now roll of the dice now for Davide's sleeping Gambit. And even though it is very slow, it can still offer up sucker punches right now. So we could still see it wake up next turn and get a sucker punch off before it maybe goes down to a headlong rush. And even then, Taran still has to avoid the rock slide flinches from the faster Great Tusk at the moment, and Gyarados is taking them super effectively, so Davide's done an excellent job of kind of switching things around.
Yeah, he really has, and his Gyarados might be down, but he's still got ample pivoting opportunities, and in fact, Taran goes for the switch and brings out a Moongus instead, and there we go, it's healed up some health thanks to its regenerator ability. Another rock slide coming out onto both Great Tusk and Amoonguss. Of course, it's now locked into that move, given it's carrying the Choice Scarf, and Taran's Great Tusk is able to pick up the knockout onto King Gambit before it was able to wake up. So that's a really, really good knockout for him. Puts Taran in a really good position.
Yep, and now that Davide has locked into that rock slide with his Great Tusk, and he only has 2 Pokemon left, this Great Tusk is here to stay, just rock sliding for the rest of the game. So that really makes the decision making on Taran's end so much easier. And any Intimidate drops on it as well are also going to be permanent for the rest of the game if Gyarados kind of comes in and continues to cycle around with those Intimidates, which are particularly useful for the Chien-Pao too.
Yeah, especially useful for Chien-Pao, lowering the defense of everything on the field, but of course it is also a physical attacker, so it doesn't want to take too many Intimidates, but Taran certainly has the Pokemon advantage in this situation. He has 4 versus Davide's 2, as Amoonguss is going to keep himself safe here for Taran, protecting. It may as well stall it out because Taran has the advantage. Rock Slide coming down, that is, of course, the only thing this Great Tusk can do in this situation. A little bit of chip onto Taran's own Great Tusk. Ice Spinner is able to go out into Taran's Great Tusk, and it is enough for the knockout. A super effective hit with the Great Tusk's defense lowered for Taran. So Taran is finally absorbing a knockout onto one of his Pokemon, but in comes the Flutter Mane.
Now, something that Taran has not yet done is go for a Terra somewhere. So he still has that option really nicely here. So you can see him clicking the fairy button there. So I was wondering whether he might have kind of chosen to go for the Terra Water on the Amoonguss to take an Ice Spinner through a Rage Powder. But obviously going for the offensive moves on the Flutter Mane could also be an option to make sure you're doing enough damage to be able to knock out that Great Tusk. But being Choice Specs and Dazzling Gleam, it's probably enough to KO the Great Tusk and obviously knock down that Chien-Pao to its Focus Sash.
Yeah, yes, that Chien-Pao is going to have to take at least 2 attacks to go down, but neither of the Pokemon on Davide's side like to face down a Fairy-type Flutter Mane. So it's looking really commanding for Taran in this position, and again, he could just switch in that Gyarados at any point for an Intimidate drop, but he is finally going to go for that Terra, and it's into his Amoonguss, and the Amoonguss is going to become the Water type here, so it's going to be able to stick around for a little bit longer, which is something that Davide probably does not want to see. It's been so pesky for him throughout this game as Rage Powder comes out from Amoonguss.
Yep, nice safe play from Taran here. Let's see if Davide kind of calls it at the moment. So Rock Slide comes out first, doing a decent chunk of damage. Should be the, yeah, it is the Ice Spinner. So Taran made the right call there. Does Amoonguss live? Yes, it does. So a very key live there, and no flinch either. Taran's very happy about that. Dazzling Gleam doing a huge chunk of damage. Great Tusk goes down. Chien-Pao down to 1 HP.
Yeah, wow. That we were all holding our breath there. Would that Rock Slide get the flinch onto Flutter Mane? Because this could have spelled a very different game. But fortunately for Taran, not only did it not get the flinch, but the Great Tusk is down and out. And Taran takes Swiss round 6. He is victorious against Davide Carrera.
Yeah, an amazingly played match as well. Like, and just one of those ones where actually it's such a nail biter, like one where, like, oh, does it flinch? Does it not? And sometimes Rock Slide shenanigans, they're kind of infrequent enough that I still like really enjoy them.
Yeah, exactly. They're very frustrating if you're in the game, but really exciting to see. A little bit like a Fisher coming out from any Pokemon, able to pick up a one-hit knockout despite its 30% accuracy. There were no Fishers in that game, but Rock Slides are plenty. And of course, Taran's very lucky in that game 1 to get that flinch in the late game.
It was, exactly, and it just kind of comes around full circle, especially when on a best of 3. That's kind of the beauty of it, is in a way, where you might get super lucky in one game, but over the course of multiple games, ultimately, ideally, the victor is the one who's kind of really kind of put in most of the effort to kind of get the skill that they needed to do to kind of clinch out the win condition that they've really sought out for.
Yeah, and that game was actually a perfect demonstration of that, given that in Game 2, Davide had a couple of critical hits that were fairly crucial and made it far easier for him to win the game. So going to a Game 3, just making sure that any luck is balanced out. You know, it won't always work out that way, but that is why we're in this best-of-3 format.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always good fun because especially when you've played a Game 1 and you've kind of revealed what lead you want to do, what strategy you want to take, and a lot of the skill is then in the future games is how to adapt. Or in terms of your team building, yes, you've gone with one strategy for a game, but then do you have another strategy to go for in the second game? And teams that have multiple kind of modes, as it were, then really thrive in that sort of environment.
Yeah, exactly. You can just catch your opponent completely off guard. Yes, it's open team sheet, but if they're preparing a lead, you don't know, of course, what Pokemon your opponent is going to be locking in. So if they're preparing a lead to counter what the victor in the previous match had won with, that may well not work out so well if your opponent does switch up and go for another tech on the team. And those always are a sign of great success on any trainer's team, I think.
Now, and looking at these teams as well compared to what we've seen kind of be winning on stream, it's very much kind of some similar teams now that we're starting to see as we kind of go on through the day one here, where some teams are just making it where others are not. And Choice Scarf Great Tusk is one of those Pokemon that really seems to be shining at the moment.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? I mean, a perfect showcase of it in that game we just had there, both trainers using it. But yeah, that Paradox Pokemon, the first one you encounter in Pokemon Scarlet, is really, really coming out on top here. And it's such a nice technique to have because it's a heavy hitter. With that Choice Scarf, it becomes fast as well. And going with a move like Rock Slide, it deals spread damage. But not only that, of course, you might get that flinch. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, dealing out damage without necessarily taking any in return.
Yeah, Great Tusk I feel like has a little bit of the 3 move slot syndrome when if you want to kind of run Protect on it with like the Life Orb or the Focus Sash sets, because having ground and fighting as your kind of your coverage that match your type, so you get that same type attack bonus, is really valuable to have. But having both those types means like suddenly flying types you just can't hit at all. So you really want that Rock Slide as well. But then if you have Rock Slide, then you need to kind of give up either your Headlong Rush or your Earthquake. And having the spread or the single target is a really nice option. But when you're Choice Scarf, you can have all 4, plus another speed option. And if your team is kind of built to be able to pivot out Great Tusk in and out, and with an Amoonguss and Gyarados you really can, then you really make the most of the entirety of the set.
Yeah, of course, the drawback there is you can't run Protect on your Great Tusk if it's rocking the Choice Scarf. But, you know, you can't have everything in this game. That would be too overpowered indeed. And, you know, Protect is crucial, of course, in VGC, as we'll be hearing if we haven't already. But, yeah, and we saw earlier with, for example, Eric Rios' game that we saw in round 2, Protecting really paying dividends for him versus his opponent who perhaps didn't have quite so many protecting options. And, you know, of course you want to deal out as much damage as you possibly can, but you've also got to keep the resources you have available to you healthy going into the game.
Yeah, and we saw Taran do that in this game too, where like he expertly kind of protected his Amoonguss exactly at the right time because it got targeted down so much throughout that game. And even though with the fast offensive nature of this Great Tusk, this slow, bulky Amoonguss, even through threat of taunt and everything, was still able to kind of pivot around everything Davide had to be able to do exactly what it wanted. Yeah,
exactly, and it's important to call out as well that when Great Tusk goes for something like that Headlong Rush, it does eat up that defense drop, and so you do want to switch it back out to get it back in with its defenses nice and healthy again. But of course, in that situation, you have to send in a Pokemon to the fray who might not want to eat up whatever attack might be coming into the Great Tusk that was there before. So, you know, it requires quite a skilled trainer to be able to play around with choice items.
Yes, and I'm certainly not me, to be honest. I like Click Tailwind and Go, and maybe a Protect just to be safe. That's what I use at EUIC, so, and it did okay. But yeah, it's not at the level of these guys. Oh my goodness! So this is why these players are here and not us. So we're shortly getting into an interview soon with Taran, but I just want to mention how this Chi-Yu team seems to be just kind of doing really well at the moment, compared with the Gyarados and the Amoonguss. Firewater Grass Claw that we did not really expect, I think, kind of switching out the Arcanine and going with something a lot more fast, a lot more offensive, and with a lot of special attacking power.
Yeah, it just goes to show how a meta can ebb and flow. You know, Arcanine is a bulkier Pokemon there to provide more support, but that means that players might be expecting less a Chi-Yu and more something like an Arcanine. So making that call, it's a really good thing for Taran to have done. And the Twitch poll, of course, was 50-50. Did Taran, was he your choice? He came out on top. How are you feeling about that? Let us know.
Exactly. And we were able to ask him about how he feels about his team and his run so far in the interview, which is all ready and set up. Don't go anywhere.
Hello trainers, welcome back to the Malmö Regional Championships. I'm here with your winner from the previous round. It is Taran Birdee, of course, and Taran, undefeated so far. Yeah. How are you feeling?
Well, honestly, I don't care about undefeated. I just wanted to be here with you. Just wanted to be here with you.
Taran, you're going to make me blush. That is so good. I mean, you know, it's having an undefeated record in a tournament is one thing, but you look like you're having a great time playing as well.
I'm loving it at the moment. I came here a week ago. I was trying to cancel my flights. Wasn't sure if I was going to come. Didn't practice much with the team, but it seems to be working out. It's Pokemon that I know how to use, like using, and enjoying it so far.
Exactly. There's a couple of Pokemon in there that I definitely want to ask you about a little bit later. But first, let's talk about that game because, when you match up against a player like Davide Carrera, you're thinking like, this is probably going to be a pretty tough one, but you handled it really, really well.
Yeah, he's an incredible player, and actually we're staying together this weekend.
Oh, really?
So we saw each other. Oh, okay. This is going to be fun, but
team kill.
Kind of, yeah. But no, it was a great game. I was biting my nails a bit. I was terrified, but no, it came out on the right end, so yeah.
I mean, game one with the rock slide end game, where there's a rock slide, there's a way, right? But
there are a few things as well. That's an icy wind miss on my Mungus, so that Assurance didn't knock out as well. I got quite lucky in there, and then I just needed one rock slide to finish you. But the GM power was a big one there. I was like, when I didn't kill with the rock slides, I was like, oh no, but I got one, so.
You still got to press the button, haven't you?
Exactly right.
You've got to do everything you can.
That's what I was playing for, and I got to it, and it worked out.
In another game, maybe not. I mean, and then game two, where Davide came back and that double sucker punch on turn one, your Flutter main in 2 games just kind of didn't get a chance until game 3, where you managed to make an incredible read onto that Gyarados. I mean, what was going through your mind when you were thinking about whether you headlong rush into that Gyarados?
So just a little on game 2, because I'd actually played the same 6 in round 3 of this tournament, and game 1, he leads Genpal, King Gambit, I lead Flutter, Great Tusk, and I go for Rock Slide and Terra Fairy Gleam, because I'm like, okay, he could double Sucker Punch. I saw the same lead from Davide, and I was like, okay, this time I lost the game because I didn't Terra Steel my Great Tusk, I Terra Fairied. So I decided just to go for any double Sucker Punch. I was like, oh, God, so frustrating.
Sheesh, right?
Yeah, sheesh. But no, in game 3, the whole point of my leads, like Flutter and Mungus, was to threaten Spores because it seems really weak to Spore.
Yeah.
Except for the Gyarados. So if I can threaten a Thunderbolt, force a Terra, and then my Great Tusk can start to headlong rush things with more freedom. Right. Especially because he wasn't bringing Dragonite in games 2 and 3.
Yeah.
It was just easy headlong rush, and that was the whole point. And so once I got my Great Tusk in and was able to protect my Mungus from a taunt, I felt really confident, and I was just happy to headlong rush it. Even if it switches to Dragonite, I get to Spore the King Gambit, and so but once I got rid of the Gyarados and no more Intimidate, I was very happy.
It definitely set you up fantastically for an end game, and then it was kind of yours to lose, and it was just it was a really nice way for you to Rock Slide definitely would have been one of those things, wouldn't it? But it was really nice to see how you handled that and just didn't do anything, really crazy. Just
I knew that his only way to win was to get Rock Slide flinching, so I just played to try and give myself as many chances to not get flinched, and eventually I was just debating whether I Terra my Flutter main or my Mungus to dodge Sucker or be better versus Sucker Punch. I decided just to go for the Amoonguss and not get flinched. I didn't get flinched, didn't I?
It paid off.
It paid off perfectly.
It paid off.
Yeah.
So, going a little bit out and talking about the team that you've brought today, there were 2 things that I really want to bring up in the team building choice that you made coming into Malmö. One of which is the Murkrow.
Yes.
We haven't seen that very much since really Regulation Set A. But also that Gyarados, which was Life Orb and had a bit of a Terra Blast thing going on.
Yeah, so I haven't clicked Terra Blast all day today. I haven't terrored it once. And before 2 days, in fact, yesterday I changed to a Life Orb Gyarados because all week I've been trying the team with a really bulky Gyarados with Thunder Wave and stuff.
Yeah.
I was never clicking Thunder Wave. I was never terroring the Gyarados.
Yeah.
And so I decided, you know what? I don't like it. It's too weak. It's not really fitting with the team well. It's, helping in balance matchups with its bulky and can waterfall.
Switching
but
around.
All I wanted to do was switch around and waterfall. I didn't care about Thunder Wave and stuff. All I needed was Taunt, really.
Yeah.
And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go a bit more offensive if I ever get a chance to. Then I can go for like Life Orb Terra Blast next to Great Tusk with Earthquake, and that's a really dangerous combo, as I've used before with Dragonite.
Yeah.
And so I decided, okay, I'm not going to really try it out, but I know it can't be that bad. I've got the moves I want. I don't terror it anyway, so it's going alright. And so far it's done what it's needed to do. And the Murkrow as well is just something that I saw last week in Portland, the regional where Maisie got top 4 with a very similar team, and I was like, I like the look of that. I like the fact that he's got the Sun really offensive mode with Murkrow, but also he had Nasty Plot Goldengo to really help versus balance matchups. I changed it to a Chi-Yu because it kind of does a bit of both. It can Nasty Plot against balance, it can just Heat Wave, set up Flutter Mane. And so I thought, it's Pokemon that I like using. It's offensive, Pranks the Tailwind is bringing me back to Whimsicott days. And it's something I know how to use, and so I figured, what's the worst that can happen?
They were definitely good days.
They were great. I can't wait for it to be back.
I just want to take just a moment to say to the people at home, this is the sort of thing that you need to be looking at when you're preparing for these tournaments. Just trying to find the best set, even if it's not the one that everybody else is using, like your Gyarados. It can be exactly the right call, and doing what it needs to do is exactly all it needs to do.
And sometimes it's a matter of just going with what you know, even if it's slightly different Pokemon. If it's offensive, if it's really strong Pokemon you like, just go with what you know, and eventually it'll pay off, right? If you know how to do it, then it doesn't matter really what Pokemon you're using, as long as they're not bad Pokemon.
The right buttons at the right time.
The right buttons at the right time.
Listen, Taran, we haven't got too much time left. The tournament is carrying on, but just a little note on your performance this year has been phenomenal, of course. You're in the Day 2 race for the World Championships. What's your plans going into Japan?
So for Japan, I'm taking 3 weeks off of work just to go and enjoy myself. I think in the Day 2 race, if I get points here, I'll probably be guaranteed for Day 2 Worlds.
Right.
So I'm just going to take it, take a few weeks off after Malmö. This will be my last big event before Worlds. And then just see how events go, see how NAIC goes, start preparing after that, and, well, just see what I can do in Worlds.
What comes will come.
Exactly.
Well, we are wishing you all the best, both for your Worlds journey and for the rest of the Malmö Regional Championships. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to be cutting to a short break now, where we'll be back for the next round of the Malmö Regional Championships. Stay tuned.